So, chapter 19 of Boruto Vortex is finally here, and let's just say that Team Shinobi really popped off this mission. I mean, we have Sarada sniping Ryu, we have Mitsuki finally beating the allegations, and then there's Konohamaru getting consumed. So, we have a lot to discuss, but of course, let's start from the top. So, the person on the cover is Moegi, and the title of the chapter is Konohamaru-chan, and this might lead you to believe that Konohamaru is going to reveal his monkey stage mode or something, but no, this more so has to do with the concept of love, which we're going to address in a bit. Now, the chapter starts with a flashback between Araya and Shinki, where he gives him the sword that was revealed in the prior chapter. He goes on to say that he infused the blade with his chakra, and if he applies his wind style sword ability to it, he should be able to manipulate iron sand to some degree. By the way, this sword is absolutely broken, but we're gonna get to that part in a bit. Now, Araya then asked him if he's sure about this since he'll have no chance against him when they spar. Shinki then says, "Give me a break. If anything, this will be the perfect handicap," which is actually hilarious to some degree. But yeah, Araya then laughs and says, "We'll see about that." We then switch over to Shinki looking over the balcony. He then goes on to say that it's all for the purpose of protecting his father better. That is why he wants to expand their powers as much as possible. Araya then says, "Father this, father that. All you talk about is your adopted father." Shinki then says, "Of course, what's wrong with that?" Araya then tells him that he should pay some attention to Yodo as well. And Shinki then calls him a hypocrite and says, "All you talk about is Yodo." And then shows Araya looking at Yodo. Now, I don't want to make any assumptions here, and I could be wrong, but I think given the heavy focus on the concept of love in this chapter and even the prior ones, this might be implying that there's some romantic feelings between Araya and Yodo, and it might be one-sided. And it could also be the case that Yodo likes Shinki, but Shinki doesn't feel that way. This would also explain why she was so irrational when it comes to the mission of saving Shinki. And it's kind of funny since Jura implies this to be the case later on in this chapter, so we're gonna kind of put a pause on this entire thing and then we're gonna revisit it when we get to that portion of the chapter. Now we then skip back to present time where Araya uses the ability of this blade, which he calls Lodestone Sand Sealing Blade, and he then uses this to free Mitsuki from the effects of Ryu's sand as stated by Sarada. He then pretty much takes the lead of the mission and tells them, "Mitsuki, Sarada, you two focus on attacking him and I'll take care of his sand for you." Now Ryu then says, "Well, aren't you being awfully confident? I see you're totally dissing me, but that's okay." This dude is so funny. I don't know why he talks like this. But he then says, "Cause it's pumping me up more." He then uses the iron sand, which by the way, this panel looks awesome. I just love how Ikimoto colors the iron sand itself. It just pops on screen. So I hope he continues to do that. But yeah, Raya pretty much negates his iron sand, which is a bit insane. And I want you guys to understand that even though he has the ability to manipulate sand as well, this specific sand, there also has to be some power factor as well, because he's forcing Ryu's sand to do something Ryu doesn't want it to do. And Ryu, of course, is infusing the sand with his 10 tails chakra. So to what extent does Araya's power scale to Ryu's for him to be able to manipulate it in this way and not be overpowered by Ryu's own power? So I think there's a lot going on here that isn't really being focused on, but we'll see what happens. Now, despite Yodo selling the mission, which is what led to this happening, she also does come in clutch here because she uses her enhanced hearing ability to tell them where the sand is coming from, which allows Araya to then counter it before it even gets to them. This of course led Ryu to say, "I see. You're not just talk." That is when Sarada chooses to rush in and use her fireball jutsu to attack Ryu. But of course, Ryu is able to block this using his iron sand. Now the spoilers did say great fireball or some other translation, but based on what's shown here, it's just a regular fireball jutsu. Now Mitsuki of course then comes in clutch and attacks Ryu with his chakra snakes while he was distracted by Sarada. He then pops up beside or somewhat next to Ryu, and it's revealed that he's in Sage mode, which by the way I think is one of the best looking transformations in the entire franchise, so it's always good to see it on screen. But yeah, Mitsuki tried to attack him with his snakes once again, which by the way is the exact same combination attack that he tried to use against Boruto, and Boruto kind of escaped in a very similar way. So it seems like Ryu then turns into sand and just disappears from the battlefield. By the way, Mitsuki himself notes this to the other characters, which is very important for what happens next. Now, Yoda still has the enhanced hearing ability, which allows her to kinda tell where he's coming from by hearing the sand grains rubbing together. So she then directed Araya towards his location, and he then uses the power of the sword to force him to go back to his humanoid form. Now, it also seems to restrict his movement as well, because it seems like Ryu isn't able to move. And it would make perfect sense given that the name of the ability is Lodestone Sand Sealing Blade, which might be able to restrict movements. But yeah, Mitsuki of course didn't let this moment pass, and he attacked him with his snakes once again. Now I will point out that I'm not sure if the snakes bit him or just struck him, because it seems like they're biting him, and this might play an important role in what happens in the upcoming chapter, because it doesn't really play out in this one. But if they bit him, it might be able to inject some poison into him. Even though it's not the real snakes and more so chakra, it might also be the case that Mitsuki is able to do that using these snakes as well. But we'll see what happens, but it does seem like Ryu's in some level of pain. Now that is when Sarada finally activates her Sharingan and rushes in with the Chidori and struck him in the torso area. And this also mirrors what happened in the Boruto fight, so I think that's what they were going for. And this panel also looks very cool as well. Though it does seem like this wasn't enough, because he then just transforms into sand again, and Sarada goes on to say that the attack itself was too shallow. He just turned himself into sand and hid again. Then we have Araya over here. He's kind of feeling himself, okay, because he's doing a lot of work here, so he's very in tuned right now. And he's like, we'll track him down to the ends of the earth. We then skip back to the conversation between Matsuri and Konohamaru, and I will say that Konohamaru might be the worst ninja in the history of this franchise, and you guys will see why. So yeah, Matsuri is pretty much spazzing out, and she's shouting and saying, I just want to call you Konohamaru-chan, what's the big deal? And Konohamaru, of course, him being the adult here, he's like in his 30s, and this entity isn't even 1 year old. He's beefing with a baby, he's beefing with an infant. He then goes on to shout and says, I told you already, I don't like it. It doesn't feel right. She then says, and yet, you let that wench Moegi call you that. It's so unfair. He then goes on to say that he can't change how he feels and he shouldn't have to explain himself. This of course causes Matsuri to spaz out even more, and she questions why he's so selfish. Just let me call you what I want. He then says, you're the one being selfish. Why are you so fussy over what to call me anyway? She then says, fussy? You hypocrite. You're the one being picky. Sorry, Toby. Now, as I just said, Konohamaru might be the worst ninja ever. Mind you, his entire mission hinges on trying to persuade Matsuri or trying to take advantage of her affection towards him, which of course will allow her to drop her guard and then he can try to destroy her, right? That's the entire goal of his mission. That is what he's here to do. And he's trying to jeopardize this mission, which by the way puts the entire planet at risk just to not have her call him Konohamaru-chan. Is this not insane? I want you guys to tell me if I'm being way too hard on Konohamaru, or if I'm right, just let me know in the comments, because I just think this is crazy. It's just a name, bro. The planet is at risk. Please get your priorities straight. This is just crazy. Now I will say that aside from Konohamaru being incompetent, it also does play into the plot as well, because this all leads into what Jura says next, which we're gonna get into in a bit. Now we then skip over to Ada, and she's watching this conversation. She then says, the issue isn't what she wants to call you, so much as it is that you two don't share a relationship that allows it. But that's beyond you, isn't it, Konohamaru-chan? And we then skip over to Boruto and Kashin Koji, and Ada pretty much tells them what's going on. She tells them that Konohamaru is in a pinch, he pissed off Matsuri and is about to get devoured. He then asks her about Sarada and the mission with Ryu, and she says that they're old in their own, but it's still too early to tell how things will end. So they're in no position to go help Konohamaru right now. And that's when Boruto kinda clenches his sword, and it seems like he wants to go help Konohamaru, but Koji then stops him and says, I know you want to rush over there, but don't. Now is not the time. Which is kind of interesting, since it implies that there is a time when he can go help them, which is kind of contradictory to what he said in the prior chapter, which is that he can't help them under any circumstance. So we'll see how this one plays out. As I said before, Koji is able to see possible futures, and him simply knowing the future or telling Boruto about the future changes the future based on what Koji himself says. So even though Koji saw possible futures where Boruto did die when he went to help them, that doesn't mean that this will still happen in this current timeline. But yeah, we then skip over to Jura, and he's speaking to Hidari. He then says, ideally, in my opinion, life forms should obey their instincts to drive towards the goal known as evolution. Yet because of their social nature, humans bind themselves with restraints called reasoning. dulling that instinct. It's a harmful side effect of acquiring intelligence, and it is why humankind faces carries a fatal flaw, unlike us divine trees who stay true to our instincts. That's when you have the bug Shinju saying, "I see. Poor humans, but it's got nothing to do with us." Jura then says, not so fast. For that isn't the only harmful effect of intelligence. The other concept carries with it the risk of causing even us divine trees serious problems. And this concept, of course, is love. We then skip over to Matsuri still trying to devour Konohamaru, and she says that my head is so full of thoughts of you, it's driving me batty. Why do I have to have these feelings? It's so painful and makes me crazy mad. She then thinks to herself and says, yeah, and that's precisely why. Because if I devoured you, I wouldn't ever have to feel this way again. We then skip over to Jura again, and this part is really important. So he goes on to say that Team 10 is comprised of accomplished shinobi, but they still prioritized Himawari's safety over their own teams. What is shocking is that they were all aware of how foolish that decision was. In particular, Inojin lost his composure and ended up losing his life needlessly. Both of these foolish actions were caused by love derailing their thinking. Hidari then asked him, so what is this love thing? Is it a disease? Jura then says, the term itself appears in many tomes, but it seems impossible to pin down. At the very least, the fact that it has the ability to cause serious trouble in life forms cannot be overlooked. I'm sure you hear it too, or instinct screaming in warning that we must understand this dangerous concept called love and we must overcome it. Now I'm sure you guys have picked up on what's going on here. They're kind of mirroring what's going on with Konohamaru and Matsuri with the concept of love and the irrational behavior that it causes. So when it comes to Konohamaru and Moegi, this concept of love is what's clouding their judgment. Konohamaru of course doesn't want her to call him Chan due to his feelings for Moegi, which of course led to him compromising the mission. And the same thing can be said for Matsuri. This love that she feels for Konohamaru led to her compromising her mission as well. The same thing when it comes to Yodo not being able to control her emotions, and also Sarada being distracted due to that conversation Sumire brought up about her love for Boruto. So pretty much what Ikimoto is trying to imply here is that all of these actions these characters are making here, whether it be bad or good, is influenced by the irrational behavior caused by love, which Jura has taken notice of. By the way, this also ties back to the Matrix as well, because the concept of love is why Neo chose to save Trinity and not humanity by resetting the Matrix. The concept of love is why he chose to continue fighting, it is why he persisted. And when it comes to Agent Smith, he wasn't able to understand this because he was just a machine.
And all of them as artificial as the Matrix itself. Although only a human mind could invent something as insipid as love.
So Ikimoto is doing something similar here as well, where these Shinjus, of course not being humans, they don't understand the concept of love as literally stated by Jura. So they want to understand it and they want to overcome it. Now I do think this is somewhat different and it's kind of a different route, since unlike Jura, Smith didn't want to understand it. He just thought it was a silly concept that only humans could understand. So the themes are definitely overlapping to some degree, but with a few minute changes. And by the way, this makes perfect sense since Boruto is influenced by the Matrix as stated by Ikimoto himself. So there are many parallels between them, and I have a video that goes in depth on every single similarity between Boruto and the Matrix, and I think you guys might enjoy it. So go ahead and watch it and give me your thoughts, and you guys might get an idea of where the story is headed. Oh, and by the way, only 70% of you guys are subscribed to the channel, so if you guys are enjoying the content, go ahead and hit subscribe and also drop a like on this video if you guys liked it. And by the way, the membership program is here, so if you guys want to join the membership program, you guys can go to the home page and just hit the join button. You can then decide which tier is more appetizing to you, and you know, you can join that one. But yeah, now let's get back to the chapter. Now we then skip back to the fight itself, and we have Yodo telling them where he's attacking from once again. He then seems to appear in the sky and he's once again restricted by Araya's sword. And this is kind of interesting because it seems like he's able to do this from a great distance, but maybe it's just the paneling that makes it look very far away. It could be that he's just right above Araya, but we'll see. Now Ryu is adapting to these methods and he summoned some Clawgrams to attack them. They then start to get overpowered or overwhelmed by these Clawgrams because they just seem to be falling from the sky, infinite amounts of Clawgrams, which is interesting because it implies that most of them weren't turned into the Shinju, which we kind of just assume because the 10 tails was missing along with the Clawgrams, but it could be that they're just somewhere else and you know, we'll find it out soon enough. But yeah, Mitsuki and Sarada both attack them and Sarada is using a different jutsu, the Phoenix Flower Jutsu, which is still fire, but you know, it's more than one in small pockets, so it's a different jutsu, okay? But yeah, as I said, they start to get overwhelmed and one of them actually bite Yodo, but Araya stepped in and slashed it before it transformed into a tree. Now this didn't end well because Ryu then popped in and pushed the Clawgram that had the sword stuck in his shoulders into another Clawgram, thus sending the sword away. So now they don't have the sword to disable his Iron Sand, which puts them in a very tough spot. We then skip back over to Matsuri, who's still trying to consume Konohamaru. She then says, "So, let's now become one, Konohamaru-chan." That's where the chapter ends. So yeah, this was a pretty good chapter and it was pretty balanced as well because you had a lot of fighting going on, a lot of action, and also some dialogue as well that goes into the motivation of the characters and also the overall theme of the story, which again is the concept of love, which ties into the concept of why, because of course love influences the why. It's a reason, right, why we do things. So I do think this is very interesting, and as I said before, I did make a video that goes in depth on the comparisons between the Matrix, and it also explains the Momoshiki prophecy as well because it also ties into the concept of love and the concept of why, and this might also be why Sarada and Sumire are immune to omnipotence. So there's a lot to go over here and there's a few videos coming up later this week, but I'll leave you guys for now. If you guys like the video, drop a like and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.